Good morning and welcome, Wicked Smart listeners. Thanks for joining me this week. This is Chris Pre again, and my focus every week, as you know, is to empower you in some shape, form, or fashion to take action, to change your behaviors, to think differently, and to plan your escape if it applies to you from your JOB. And frankly, if you're in the real estate world and you're in a different niche, to hopefully empower you to see how and why and when to implement adding this strategy, the creative financing strategy, to sort of your bag of tricks, your repertoire. Because if you're a wholesaler, I'm not poo-pooing on you, but you've got to prepare for the market changes that are going on here. And frankly, you are tripping over leads that could be in the finance world, in the creative finance world. So that's usually my goal. Buckle in here though, while we bring you the next Wicked Smart Masters class. We're gonna get a chance to hang out with Mrs. Emma Powell. Now, I was on Emma's podcast. This is the writer downer. It's called Passive Income Adventures with Emma Powell. And her story is really cool, guys. She went from literally a stay-at-home mom of 6 children to a multimillionaire in less than 5 years. So I want you to think about this. 5 years ago, when you thought of your goals, if you look back today, and this is as of this filming, this is going to come out to you guys somewhere around the end of April. If you were to look back to April of 19, let's say, and you look forward, are you where you thought you'd be? Because here's Emma looking back 5 years ago. Wow, my world has been turned upside down for the positive. She's part of almost 1,000 apartment units and sponsors a free commercial investing club to help others. So she empowers and gives back that energy. Super, super cool. All right, guys, I want to make sure to remind you about our QLS Live event. We've been hosting this thing since 2016 in a basement, and now we have a brand new facility in Boston, Massachusetts. This year, 2024, it's going to be September 23rd and 24th. That's a Monday and a Tuesday. It makes it easy for travel. It is literally right next to the airport. Go to smartrealestatecoach.com/QLS Live and use the coupon code podcast50. That's going to give you 50% off. I'll see you there. All right, Emma, with that as a backdrop, welcome to the show. And it's good to hang out again because I know we were just on your show.
Yeah, just had you on my podcast. I think it published like yesterday.
Oh, cool. Well, how's that for timing? I love it. They're gonna be hearing this at the end of April, so that's still very time sensitive. Emma, just so they get it again, I want them to subscribe, even though I said it in the intro. Just your podcast again and other ways to find you. I usually do this at the end, but I wanted to do it right away, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, we've got Passive Income Adventures on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes, or you can jump on my website, investwithemma.com, and get a calendar appointment. And I also just launched my new pitch deck design website, where I am a graphic designer by trade and do all the pitch decks for our groups. And so I just started offering that to other syndicators at highrise.group.
I love it. I love it. So for those of you in the Wicked Smart listener community who want to attack some of these strategies onto your current situation, or you're brand new and you say, I want the route that Emma took. So really cool story. Let's talk, Emma, a little bit before we dive in about how you kind of got here, right? I mean, I said the basics in the intro, but it doesn't do your story justice. So maybe spend a few minutes on that, and then I'll kind of start dissecting it.
Yeah, we had just kind of our lives turned upside down at the end of 2017. My husband came home from work early, and you all know what that means in the tech industry. He's like, I lost my job. And we really were not prepared. I was a graphic designer and photographer. I did real estate and wedding photography. And I was making decent money for the amount of part-time I was spending on, but it could not support our family. And so we just went into panic mode. Like, what are we going to do? You know, LinkedIn, everything, brushed up resume, call everybody, go to all of these networking events, trying to look for any kind of a job, a solution. And even though we had an emergency fund and we didn't have any debt, I just didn't feel like our emergency fund, when you're not making great money, that emergency fund almost becomes like the anti-security blanket because you don't want to spend it. And so every time you spend it, you're like, I don't know how long it's going to take me. It took me so long to build this up. How long is it going to take me to get it back? And you just decimate it so quickly in a crisis like that. And so he found a job relatively quickly, got recruited, and we had to move across country. And so I gave up my photography business. My graphic design job couldn't be done remote. And so I was basically unemployed. And even though he had a good job and a great new job and was making more than he was before, kind of got eaten up by the change of cost of living, because we were living in Austin, Texas, and we moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, and it was just a lot more expensive. And I went out there again. I'm like, well, you did networking events and all that to find something. So I started hitting them pretty hard for myself, thinking maybe I want to start a business, helping people do their social media, their graphic design, I have an entrepreneurial management degree, and I just like a lot of business owners don't even know how to do their own bookkeeping or any of those essential tasks. They don't even know what a P&L is. And I thought, oh, I can help businesses run more efficiently. But for whatever reason, in Salt Lake City, real estate investing is huge. And so a lot of these business networking events that I was going to were actually real estate investing networking events. And so I thought, maybe I should just get into this. This is something that I can do part-time because I didn't want to work full-time. I have 6 homeschooled kids, and I just wasn't interested in going to a job. And in graphic design, photography, or whatever, I was looking maybe 50, 60K a year. And I thought, well, with landlording or real estate investing, I can really make more than my husband. There's no ceiling on it. And I started thinking about it. It took me a couple of months to really commit. And then after that, I just dove into it and started learning everything I could, go to tons of networking events, and started buying deals from wholesalers and looking for some commercial stuff like apartment complexes and self-storage units.
Yeah. So what was, as you talk, I'm thinking just logically through the process, what was your biggest challenge with that? Obviously, when I was on your show, we didn't get to dive into your story too much. So what was your biggest challenge with that? Because here you are, you lose it, or your husband loses the job. And I scream about this all the time, Emma, that I say to the W-2 out there right now, your job is your biggest risk. It's not the real estate venture. Your job is. So when you guys made that transition, I know you just said it like, okay, we did all that, but that's not easy. So what was your biggest challenge and how did you overcome it? Just to maybe give them a nugget.
Oh, biggest challenge. I feel like everything kind of came together. It's like the stars aligned. So it was hard. But we had cash because we had sold our house in Texas and we were renting a house in Utah. And so, again, we had no debt. So we had that emergency fund. I guess just figuring out like where to start, because the shiny object syndrome, when you have some cash burning a hole in your pocket and you don't know what you're doing, I felt like that was maybe a blessing, but also carried the flip side, the challenge. Like, I've got cash. I want to make sure that I'm a good steward over this money and to make sure that we can build a business doing it. So we set up a couple of fail safes. My husband just said, as long as we have a down payment for our next house, the rest of it just mentally turns into monopoly money. Just go start the business. If we lose it, it wasn't like we had it. And it wasn't enough to retire on. I think we had somewhere around 400,000. And so it wasn't enough to just invest passively and then retire on our income. Plus I knew he was going to have to work another 5 or 6 years. And I thought, well, if I hustle really hard for 5 or 6 years, then I'll get to the point where I can replace his income. And so for the 5 or 6 years, I'm going to do active investing, and then we could kind of switch over to passive after that. So just getting a handle on what was possible. At first, it was just layoff protection. And then I started really kind of thinking bigger, like maybe this could replace his income, retire him early. Maybe we could become very wealthy instead of just doing okay. And that was the scary place for me to even hope. Because if you're going to go for that, you really need to go for that. And so to believe it fully and then go after it, I think that was probably one of the most difficult things, probably the mindset, honestly.
Yeah, isn't it always like people don't realize the mindset is so big? Zach, my son-in-law and partner, and I were talking at a RIA in Vermont here, which is where I have one of my properties. And a guy came up to him at the end and said, geez, you know what I realized in this creative niche, but it's any niche, to your point. He said, the mindset is a lot more than I thought. Like, people just don't understand it. That's the piece. You and I can teach people how to do deals, right? It's all the stuff that gets in the way. So huge nuggets you just dropped there. Can you address, I'm going to go 2 different ways here. Can you address 2 different angles here? One, someone's listening to the Wicked Smart community and they go, yeah, I kind of want to retire. I'm okay now, but I want to see how I can retire. But number 2, can you address the person that's the W-2 worker right now that wants to come into solopreneur? Me and you go, hey, why just do it? Like, go entrepreneurial route. But it's hard when they're stuck in it. So can you adjust both of those plans? I know it's not easy to do in 2 or 3 minutes, but give a nugget or 2 for each category if you don't mind.
There's a term that we use in real estate development, highest and best use. So when you're looking at an old house that you could tear down, could you fix it up? If you tear it down, can you build a warehouse or a high rise? And so you have to underwrite every single scenario when you're doing real estate development according to highest best use, figure it out, like what is the permitting, what does the current zoning allow? So there's a lot of research that needs to go into figuring out, like, what am I going to do with this property? What's the potential? We bought a single family home that was zoned as an R3, which means you could have up to a triplex on it. And I got really excited. I thought, oh, we're going to go and buy this. But then when I dug into the research, I realized The lot itself, even though it was zoned R3, was too small to fit even a duplex. So I ended up not tearing the house down, fix it up and put someone in. So that's the kind of research process you have to go through for highest and best. And so for those who really are entrepreneurial and they want to leave their jobs and become an entrepreneur, it's like a baby that you have to give birth to. If that's a passion inside of you, then you really have to listen to that and go for it, and don't let that fear stop you. But there's always that secondary concern of, how do I keep the lights on while I'm building this? So for my husband and I, that partnership was great because he had the W-2 for that stable stream of income. And then I was able to go out and become a real estate professional and just really focus all my attention, not having to spend any of the money in the business and reinvesting 100% of our profits until he was ready to quit his job. And then we could start pulling a salary. So if somebody really feels like they have that entrepreneurial bent, you kind of have to listen to it. You can't ignore that forever, or you'll probably be somewhat miserable in your job. But the other thing is, not everybody needs to be a real estate investor. Can you imagine if everybody was like, hey, I'm going to quit my job and become a landlord? Well, who's going to rent the house? Who's going to, I mean, it's just, it doesn't make sense. And so highest and best use for a lot of our investors are to become just 100% passive investor, because they maybe live in the Bay Area and they don't even own their own home because it's so crazy there. Certainly don't want to buy rentals. They're like, I am too busy doing my engineering job or my IT thing to be able to buy rentals out of state. So I would prefer to just take the extra disposable income that I have and put it towards purely passive limited partner investments with a fund or with somebody that they know in the industry. And that allows them to max out their 401ks, get those benefits. And because you can't put that much money a year into a 401k, right? It's pretty limited for high income earners. It's just not going to be enough to retire. And so they're taking extra from their disposable income and they're throwing that at investments. And if they do that pretty intensely for 5 to 7 years, they can get to the point where they can replace even a high income and be able to retire early. And everybody says, here's the trap. Everybody says, I don't want to retire early. What would I do with myself? And I think that that's the wrong question, and maybe even the wrong term to say retire early. The question you need to ask is, do you want to work at your W-2 in your cubicle, in your job, until you're 65 years old? And when you say, I never want to retire, what do you mean when you say that? Is that a business? Is that I want to start a nonprofit and volunteer? When people say, I never want to retire, it's like, you really want to work at a 9 to 5 in a cubicle until you're 65 or 70 years old? I have never spoken to a high income earner that said yes. They all want to retire somewhere in that 50 to 55 range. That seems to be the most common answer that I hear. Unless they're already 50 to 55, then they're like, I'm going to have to work till I'm older because I spent everything. But most people start thinking about this in their mid 40s. And pretty much everybody says, I want to retire in less than 10 years. And that's usually about 55. So when you say, I never want to retire, don't let that kind of mindset of I never want to retire prevent you from going after the investing that you need to get done so that you can retire, because you might have to. Somebody might have a health problem. You might have a health problem. You might just get sick of it, or you might suddenly get a bad manager and decide, I actually don't like working here anymore. You need to be able to quit. And that's a big difference than I never want to retire because I don't want to lose my purpose. Trust me, if you're financially free, you will find a new purpose, or keep doing the same thing if that you rediscover that purpose. But too many people say, I never want to retire, and use that as an excuse to not even try.
Yeah. How about just using the wording? I love your opinion on this, but how about just use the wording? It's a new chapter. Like, it's not retirement. It's a retirement, such an old word, right? But yeah, how about a new chapter? That's cool.
Exactly.
Okay. A couple things. You said something really neat earlier. You said something about everybody can't to become an entrepreneur in real estate. I was on a show with, I forget who, frankly, so I don't know who to give credit to, but I think you'd agree with the statement they made, and that was entrepreneurship is hard. It's hard. It's not for everybody, right? So that's a super cool nugget you dropped. Let's talk about this. When someone's going through running a family, the nuances with that, and making this transition, I don't care what stage they're at, so let's drop what stage they're at. Any nuggets you can impart there, because you're juggling it. And I don't know if we should give them the pitch of how you kind of live wherever and whenever you want. You might want to drop that lifestyle for us and then talk about how they balance all that.
Yeah, for me, having so many kids and making the decision to homeschool actually brought us a degree of freedom, that we had time and location freedom more than if they had been enrolled in school. And that really started me down a path of saying, well, what else can we change in our lives so that we can have true location and time freedom? And for us, that was the W-2. we try to find them a 100% remote job, but then you have to log in every day, still have a good internet connection. And so we really built our lives around time and location freedom. So now we travel full time. We live in an RV, and we've got our 3 youngest with us. We backpacked across Arizona for 3 months, and then we bought the RV after that. And our 3 oldest kids are living in our house in Salt Lake City. And so they're down this week for the solar eclipse. And we are crushed into this RV because you can't get a hotel room in this area for anything. But just that opportunity to say, like, hey, what do we want to do? We wanted to go to the eclipse. We've been planning it for 7 years since the last one, and making that happen. So that kind of lifestyle for us is very important. I always say that real estate investing back in the Carlton sheets, infomercial day used to be about getting a Lamborghini or a nice house. And now the ultimate flex is location and time freedom. And that has become like the thing that a lot of us like Gen Xers really, really value highly. Like, I want to remote in the Bahamas or whatever. And that we're no stranger to that. But we were just looking at our lives and saying, what do we need to add and what do we need to cut out so that we can actually get that in a reasonable period of time and be able to enjoy that sooner rather than later. I think we retired a little too early from a financial standpoint because irregular income and you've got investments that are not mature yet, so you can't really touch it. It's like equity you can't get at. And so sometimes I feel like we retired too early from that standpoint. But then somebody told me, he said, you're never going to look back on this and say you did it too soon. You'll probably look back at it and say you didn't do it soon enough. And so that was what gave me the courage to just say, look, we're doing it. He's leaving his job. And we're done, and we'll figure out a way to make it work. And I knew we were going to have a difficult couple of years just trying to figure out this new lifestyle, our new expenses, our new income patterns, very different than getting a regular paycheck. But because it was so important to us to have that time and location freedom and spend more time with our kids and spend more time with each other, we did what needed to get done and made the sacrifices needed to do it. So I don't like painting this lifestyle as like this ultimate, like, oh yeah, I just moved to Costa Rica whenever I want. It definitely takes a lot of planning and concerted effort, the right mindset, and the willingness to sacrifice, and the willingness to put up with the criticism because you're living a lifestyle that's a little bit different than most other people are willing to live. So that has been what's worked for us, is just trying to block that out and just live our own truth, whether that's mainstream or not. And that it can get you every once in a while, but you just have to keep focused and keep going.
So did you guys have, by the way, you used the word freedom. Before I get to my next question, we surveyed our tribe, so to speak, 6 months ago. The word freedom was what kept coming up to your, that could come, like, yes, everybody wants to make money, but that word freedom was key, was one of the best things that we heard. Did you guys, Emma, lean on any mentors during this process? I haven't ever asked you that, or kind of how does that play into your strategy, or did it play?
It did. I started out taking a course on creative financing, and the teachers of that course really helped me do not my first real estate deal. My first one was with our local RIA, where I made a hard money loan to a fix and flipper. We basically just pooled everything we had and bought the house for cash. And then he went in and did the fix and flip. So we were the private money partner on that. So that was our first deal. But my deal where I actually owned the home and not just had a lien on it, right? With the titles in my name. They basically walked me through the process, and it was a subject to mortgage. They took over from somebody who'd been unemployed for a while. I had no idea what any of that stuff was. They literally filled out the paperwork for me, and then helped me find a local attorney to the property. And we went in, and we still own that home, and it's been a rental for us for, I think, about 5 or 6 years. So that really helped out a lot. I definitely made my money back from that course and that mentorship, even though that path of just doing creative seller financing, lease options, rent to own, it didn't end up becoming the path for me. I didn't want to do that as kind of like my main gig. It helped out a lot because we're trying to buy a portfolio of apartment complexes in 2020. And right when lending shut down and nobody knew what was going on, it was like, I think I put it under contract Valentine's Day of 2020. And then a month later, all of our lenders basically pulled out. Yeah. And I said, hey, Mr. Seller, there's this thing called seller financing where you could transfer the title over to me, and then you carry the note because he owned him free and clear, and we'll just pay you for the next 2 to 3 years until lending opens back up and we can refinance them after we get the remodel done. Perfect, right? And he said, I'm not transferring title to you. And I said, okay, Mr. Seller, there's this thing called rent to own where we just pay you on a master lease, and then you give us subleasing rights and the right to fix up the apartments. So we were putting all the money into the renovations. We had to build things into the contract that said, if for whatever reason we have to hand this back, he was going to credit us the amount that we had spent, increasing the value, that kind of thing. So it was a lot of back and forth getting the details of the contract correct. But that whole course on how to creatively finance this really allowed me to buy commercial properties on a rent to own, which is not that common. But when you're dealing with more of a mom and pop type of seller, they can get a lot more creative. And say I called the guys back and I was like, hey, how do I structure this thing? What should I watch out for? And they kind of held my hand through that process with that apartment complex as well. So yes, mentors come in really handy. Some of them I paid, some of them I never paid. I might have bought like an inexpensive course or a book, or just went and consumed every piece of content, free content that they put out there. So I've had many mentors, some paid, some unpaid, and I've gotten value from all over the place. I've kind of curated my own education in that way.
I love it. Super cool nuggets. We took a building like that. As you know, we were mostly residential, but we took a building my son and I bought. It was his first investment with me in high school, and then it was like a headache, a little 2-unit commercial building.
Yeah.
And we let someone do a master lease with us. He ended up tearing the building down, building like a $500,000 building. This thing was worth like $200,000 on our property, and then he eventually cashed it out. So there's all kinds of cool things you can do once you know how to pivot. You just exhibited that.
Yep.
And as we wrap up, anything that you would get off the show and go, I didn't share this, or Chris didn't ask me this. Any last like nuggets that we want to impart? Because you dropped so many cool nuggets for them. Anything else we missed?
Learning to raise capital is probably the most important skill you can have as a real estate investor. Even if you don't know that much about the buildings and finding deals, if you can bring in the money, people will just bring you deals. I firmly believe there's more money out there than good deals out there, but that's more true in the institutional space where it's $100 million property, or you have a family office or pension fund looking to place $100 million, and they're struggling to find really great deals, institutional quality deals. But down in the mom and pop range, the retail investor range, there are probably more deals out there than money available. So if you're able to raise capital or find capital, use your own capital, whatever that looks like, you will be invited into deals. People will bring deals to you. So if you're frustrated that you're looking around and you can't find any good deals, it's probably because you are looking for the deal and then you have to go scramble and raise the money. So in that case, you're doing both things. You're finding the deal and then having to go scramble to raise the money. And so we chose to specialize in raising capital because we felt like if we had a war chest that we could bring into things, then people would bring us deals. And so if you're a deal finder, we want to talk to you. Or if you are an investor who wants to get in on with somebody who's going to do all the work for you, there are options there. But just remember that the limit that you have on the amount of deals that you can do is really the amount of money that you can put together to get it done. And just think, if you are doing mostly residential, but then you had this great commercial opportunity come up, and you were like, I can't afford it because I don't know how to raise $1 million. Once you figure out how to raise that capital, you're really only limited by the amount of capital that you can raise.
Yeah, no brainer. Emma, once again, how can they reach you? And I'll put it also in the show notes, because I find when I listen to a podcast, I'm like, oh, they're going to bring it up again. I didn't catch it. So give them again how they can reach you, and then we'll wrap things up.
Yeah, if you're looking for help with marketing, again, marketing for deals or marketing for money, I can help you at highrise.group. We design pitch decks. I'm a founder. I'm an investor. And so I'm able to bring in that graphic design background and that investor background to help you really craft a compelling presentation to be able to raise capital, especially to raise capital. But also if you're just looking for deals and you need to send stuff out to, direct to seller stuff, and you need some sort of a marketing materials or pitch deck, I can help you at highrise.group. We have a free club that meets every Monday night where we just analyze deals together. It's a commercial real estate club at riseclubcapital.com, and we just sit around and crunch through deals. I know it's a huge topic and it's hard to do alone. And so we came together as a group so we could find great deals. And if we like the deals, we actually will raise money inside of our group and go and invest in them as a group. And then if you want to schedule a call with me, just go to investwithemma.com and jump on my calendar. And I'm happy to talk to anybody, whether you're a potential an investor like a limited partner and want to jump in on our fund, or you're just like, hey, point me in the right direction and help hook me up with some resources. We can help you out. So we can really help anybody from the unaccredited to the accredited investor, the active or the passive. We have avenues. And the reason we built it that way is because there are so many different kinds of people, and we just didn't want to leave people out, because we wanted to be able to have an avenue for most people to find and identify something that they could do inside of it.
Yeah, no, I love it. Thank you so much. I mean, there's not a person you probably didn't touch there in the Wicked Smart community. So I appreciate that. And listen, the key thing for you guys listening, the Wicked Smart listeners, is this. If it's Emma, if it's someone else, do something. after this show. If Emma hit like 5 or 6 areas that I think touched all of you, but if not, find someone, right? Emma, just get in the game and let us help you. Emma, super cool to hang out again. We probably should do this every few months and update each other. So good to see you. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. We'll talk to you soon. Appreciate the time on your podcast and talking to your audience.
You bet. Okay, Wicked Smart listeners, that does wrap up our time together with Miss Emma Powell. And guys, if you have not, I always say this, gone over to the YouTube version of this, you're going to want to see this because it is better to get to know us. And I think you're going to pull more out of it. And if you're just driving and passively listening, it's an opportunity for you to go ahead and revisit it and revisit some action items. And speaking of action items, I invite you all, and I'm going to do this every show, guys, until we get to the QLS Live event or until we sell out, because this is a flagship event that we've hosted since 2016 in the basement of a Chamber of Commerce, literally. And this year, it's the first year where we're pulling it out of Rhode Island. I selfishly, for all these years, I think 8 years, this is the 9th year we're doing it. 8 years, I said, well, I want everybody to come to me. And it was super convenient, but it wasn't convenient for you. So we're pulling it into Boston now. It allows you to fly into there or drive into there and be super convenient for you. And I want to get you all there with a 50% ticket while we still have tickets available. This year, we truly have a limitation because we're not in a ballroom. In the ballroom, we could have fit 300 if we wanted to, depending on how we rearrange it. Well, at the Boston venue, which is brand new, it's super cool. You're going to love it. When we are capped at I think it's 150 or 160. Whatever the number is, we're capped. So go to smartrealestatecoach.com/QLS live. So smartrealestatecoach.com/QLS live. But I want to give you the ticket for 50% off. So when the cart comes up, punch in coupon code podcast50, podcast50. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Real Estate Coach podcast. If you're ready to invest in yourself and take your investing to the next level, check out our 90-day Jumpstart program by going to smartrealestatecoach.com/jump. That's smartrealestatecoach.com/jump, because now is the time to act boldly in this unprecedented market shift.